Welcome everyone, Costin here with a quick character build guide for Baldur's Gate 3, covering the essentials that you need to know when you are selecting your character to play through the game. Keep in mind you can play as one of the origin characters, though you can't customize them as the same way as you can a custom character, though with the exception of the Dark Urge. But keep in mind, the Dark Urge itself is going to impose certain restrictions on you, and it's going to force you to make certain decisions that you otherwise wouldn't care about. Just bear that in mind. Plenty of people started with Dark Urge, and quite a few people did abandon the Dark Urge for, well, pretty clear and obvious reasons. But let's go over this piece by piece. First off, you have to select your race. The race gives you certain benefits in certain areas versus another. The most reasonable choice, if you will, is probably going to be the human for a lot of people. Though keep in mind, obviously you can play whatever race you want, just gotta keep in mind what advantages you have versus the disadvantages. Humans get the civil militia, so they get weapon proficiency with spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives, and they also have armor proficiency with light armor and shields. Githyanki get martial prodigy. So they get armor proficiency with light and medium armor, as well as proficiency with short swords, long swords, and great swords. But human is the jack of all trades, if you will. They also get an additional skill to be proficient in. Being proficient in something means that you're good at it, more or less. So if you want to use a sword, you want to be proficient in swords, just as an example. Then you have your class choice. Now, there's all kinds of classes. I'll probably make a whole video on this. But depend on what you're going for. Depend on the playstyle. Like Paladin is a melee fighter, but also has some abilities for buffing and all that kind of stuff. Also, like, has healing. Fighters are pure fighters, all that kind of stuff. Like, just something to cover, but different playstyles. So, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, rangers, they're ranged, as you might imagine. A lot of the others are melee one way or another. Rogues can be either melee or ranged, but they're focused on stealth. But something to talk about in another video. But they also have their own proficiencies in terms of weapon and armor. So for instance, a paladin, which is what I've chosen to play in Baldur's Gate 3, has proficiency in simple weapons, which adds your proficiency bonus to attack rolls with simple weapons, and martial weapons, which gives you a proficiency bonus to attack rolls with martial weapons. And you can also use all types of armor and shields. Then you have a subclass as well, and this is a choice you're going to have to make later on with all other classes, with the exception of Paladin. For the Paladin in particular, you're going to choose an oath. This is going to be your subclass. And that oath is going to have certain tenets that you're going to follow, certain moral principles that you're going to have to follow. Paladin's worth in the lore is actually worth something, because if you break your oath, you're going to become an oath breaker. Now that has pros and cons, but effectively you're going to lose this ability that you do have here, or your subclass ability, your oath abilities, if you will. Then you have a background choice. If you go with any of the origin characters, obviously you are playing a specific character. If you decide to play the Dark Urge, you're going to have, again, a specific background. But otherwise, you do get to choose. And this will give you certain proficiencies or certain skills that you will have a benefit in. So for instance, a noble would have a benefit in history and persuasion. Then we look at ability. So abilities, these are stats points. Like you get the +2 proficiency bonus to certain skills, and you can select which skills, like which abilities here, which stats you want to be proficient in. So since I'm a paladin, one of the things I would probably want to be proficient in would be strength. Another thing would be charisma. So +2 for strength, +1 for charisma. Depending on what you choose, you may want to be proficient in one particular stat or another. What do these do? Well, strength helps you with melee weapons, also determines how far you can jump and how much you can carry in your inventory. Your inventory is pretty large, but there is a weight limit that you do have to be concerned about, and also gives you +3 to saving throws. Dexterity helps you with ranged attack and finesse weapons. So think of things like rapiers, all that kind of stuff. And also affects your initiative and armor class. What is your armor class? Well, it's your ability to basically resist physical damage, especially melee damage, in particular if you're not really wearing any armor. So for a paladin, dexterity is not as important because you're a melee class, you're wearing heavy armor, so it's not really important to focus on dexterity. So for instance, like let's say we go with the recommended choices that the game gives you. This would not be a great choice. So instead, I would dump 2 points from dexterity and 1 point from strength. Why 1 point from strength, though? Well, because the benefit here only goes up every 2 points. So having like 17 points is not really worth it. Same with 13 points in Constitution. I can drop 1 point in Constitution. Constitution basically gives you stamina, physical endurance, and also your HP. So anything with regards to endurance and just surviving damage is something you want to put points in Constitution. 14 points in this particular case. Then intelligence. Intelligence, well, what does it say? It affects memory and mental power and improves spellcasting for wizards. So if you're going with the spellcaster build, this is what you're going to want to invest quite a few points in. Now, generally, you want to have at least 10 points in every particular stat, because if you have less than that, you're going to be in the negative with it. So having at least 10 points so you don't end up in a situation where you're dice rolling and you end up in the negative, you have a -1 to that dice roll, that's something to be avoided. So having at least 10 points is recommended, and you can obviously put more with respect to that. But over here, I've balanced it out. I have 10 points in intelligence, 10 in wisdom, and 15 in charisma. And actually, I'm probably going to take 1 point and put it in wisdom. 2 points put in wisdom. Wisdom affects your intuition, your spellcasting for clerics, druids, and rangers, and also affects your wisdom checks. So there's intelligence checks and there's wisdom checks, and then there's charisma, which basically affects your persuasion ability in the game, and improves spellcasting for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks. So, for instance, for a paladin, it is important to have a good amount of charisma, given that I'm going to use it for my skills. But you do want to have these kind of balanced numbers. And then we have skill proficiencies, or skills themselves. Now, there's a bunch of different skills over here, and all of them are useful in one way or another. But what are the things that actually do matter a great deal? Well, I would strongly argue that intimidation, persuasion are important, and so is perception. Like, survival can be nice, but survival will help you figure out things are in the wild. Like, there's a bunch of things, like they're useful in different situations. But over here, like, athletics helps you with shoving enemies. So you can attack an enemy, also shove them in combat, which may end up throwing them on their ass, so to speak, in a combat situation. So what I probably want to do is, like, you do have skills that you can be more proficient than others, depending on what you've chosen in terms of race, in terms of class, in terms of subclass, background, all that stuff. So I can focus a lot on insight, I can focus on medicine, but one of the crucial skills, like the crucial skills that I would say everyone should try and get, would at least be persuasion, intimidation, perception. Because you can make perception perhaps less so, but still important. See, the character you control is the one that is going to be engaged in conversations. And their perception and their ability to engage in those conversations effectively, having benefits to the dice rolls, can be important. Also, perceiving the world around you is also a very crucial skill to have. So having perception can make a significant difference. Believe me, I've played my playthrough so far of the game without perception, and I have certainly felt it. You can make do, you can use your companions to make do with that, and you can obviously reload a bunch, but it will make your life easier if you have perception. Athletics can be useful, but not necessarily too important. So religion is something like, it's contextual, and like whenever you meet a statue of a god and you're trying to figure out what importance there is there, or insight, those kind of things. Like, it is worth reading about all of these skills that you do have and what they are going to do. So having a focus on persuasion, perception, intimidation, that is going to be important. Having at least some level of, like, at least having 10 in each of these stats, also important from my perspective. And a benefit to charisma especially can be important, but also intelligence and wisdom do play their own role. In fact, I would possibly argue that having more in intelligence and wisdom, if you can afford it, like as a paladin, I wouldn't necessarily go for that as opposed to charisma. But charisma, while it's obviously very, very useful to have, I found myself in more situations where my intelligence and my wisdom actually was more important during a playthrough. And that really is all there is to say about it, just for a quick understanding. So, like, if you want, like, for a paladin, this is what I would personally go for. Or maybe change the background over here. It's very contextual. Some skills are more useful than others. Perception is always going to be useful. Intimidation is always going to be useful. Persuasion is always going to be useful. Athletics, kind of useful in a lot of situations, but not necessarily too important compared to some of the other skills that you can have. That is all I had to say. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications.